Hey y'all, it's Steve, Hobo with Wood. In this video, I'm going to look into the best options for engraving a frame. I had one of the viewers use my suggestion on using flood fill to engrave a frame to save some time, and it did save him a considerable amount of time, but he noticed his laser making all types of erratic movement, and I'm like, you know what, send that file to me, let me see what's going on. And I did some deep diving into flood fill, why it does what it does. Still got questions, but if you want to learn how you can cut your frame engraving time in half, hang around. This is going to be an informative video, and I still have questions. So let's take a look at the design that I was emailed and asked, hey, what's going on here? So this was designed by one of the many contributors in the Facebook group, the Hobo with Wood group, Hobo with Wood Facebook group. And it was his design, as I understand, as the original piece. And it is, there we go, like a heartbeat result from a monitor, and in the heart ever so often. And that frame, it's a very basic design, but it was quite a lengthy engrave if you went at just a regular fill. So I had done a video talking about using offset fill, and he did that, and it did cut the engrave time down considerably, but his laser, he said, was jumping around like crazy. So I said, well, send me the file. Let me look at it. Let me see what's going on. See if there's a better way, because there's always another way. Don't let anybody tell you there's only one way to do things in Lightburn. And just because it's their way doesn't mean it's the right way. And what works for me may not work for you. But let's take a look at this and see what I discovered. Let me get Lightburn open here. Here we go. And let's switch over here. Let's see. There we go. All right, so here is his actual artwork. And here I've got it on a layer, single layer in a standard fill, and we look at the estimated time here, showing 21 minutes and 6 seconds. Now, you can see I've got the traversal moves turned on, so you can see the red is showing you all of the movement that the gantry is making with the laser. So anywhere you see red with no black is wasted space, wasted energy, wasted time, because the laser's just moving and not doing anything. So, and it was showing 21 minutes and 6 seconds. So he went with the offset fill, not offset fill, flood fill. Golly, I labeled that wrong. And I labeled that wrong when I sent it to Lightburn, because I've actually sent this to Lightburn asking for some feedback and some advice on how Lightburn's reasoning works, how does it rationale, what to do when it does what it does. And I labeled that as offset fill, and it's flood fill. See, I screw up all the time. So let me fix that real quick, so people don't go, wait a minute. They come in the middle of it and they say, wait a minute, that's not offset fill, it's flood fill. So this is flood fill. So flood fill goes from 21 minutes, you see, to 15 minutes. So he saved 6 minutes on this engrave time, but you can see all of the rapid movements or jumping around and jockeying back and forth that the laser's doing. In fact, let's scroll this back and let you see it here. This is flood fill. Flood fill that's what I would expect flood fill to do. Just kind of come up and do all of that axis and then do all of that, but it don't. It engraves a little bit there, and then it jumps down to the bottom, and it jumps over it there, and then does all that axis. That's good. And then it starts jumping around, jumping around, jumping around, jumping around. And I don't understand that. It doesn't do it based on the origin. It doesn't do it on closest engraving. I don't understand why it does that. Because it, but regardless, it still saved 6 minutes doing that. But I'm like, okay, that's still all those movements from back and forth and around everywhere. That's, and I'm cutting down on my cut time here. That's wasted time. So I said, gotta be a better way yet. And let me show you what the way I think that flood fill should work, not offset fill. There, that's better. That's a faster cut time. So here is, oh, I didn't mean to do that. I wanted to grab the whole thing. Here's just a square that I've got on the same layer as the flood fill. And when we look at this, you see there's no jumping around. And if we look at this, this is the way I would anticipate flood fill to work. It's going to do everything. This is the most efficient movement of the laser. It does that entire axis there until it gets to the very end. Now it starts crawling up one of the side pieces. It'll do all of that. And then once it reaches the top, where that top one starts, it'll start going all the way across the top. There you go. Now to do all that top until it's done, and then jumps over and does the other side. Now that completes the entire flood fill with no wasted movements across the, oh, too many times that time, no wasted movement across the interior of the frame. And that's how I would anticipate flood fill should work, but it doesn't. Whenever you've got some designs going on, it's causing the laser to jump around, especially on the x-axis. It doesn't do it so much on the y, but anything on the x, it gets discombobulated and does all kinds of crazy stuff, all the while still saving you time. Okay, while I'm recording this, I've been going back and forth with Lightburn's support, trying to get a better understanding about why this does what it does when it does what it does. Typical email back and forth, there's always miscommunication, misinterpretation, lack of communication because things get lost in translation. And I hate going back and forth in emails when you can just do a simple, video conference and resolve questions, and they won't do that. And I understand they don't want to do it with absolutely everyone, and I'm not saying that I'm special, but I am. But I'm not the average average Lightburn user. I'm trying to help educate everyone on how to do this and to learn why it does what it does. So if they take the time to help me get a better grasp of what's going on, I'm only going to help share it with all of you guys. But I don't have that kind of access. But I did learn something. Surprising. Didn't make any real headway, but there was something that, well, you're not going to want to go, because I want you to watch everything that I've learned in this process. Then, before I wrap this up, I'm going to show you what Lightburn explained, and it enlightened to me a little bit. I'm like, okay, well, just be sure you watch this thing through, okay? So back to the regularly scheduled programming. The tightness of your belts, your stepper motors, everything. The more movement that's going on, that it's got to try and line up all these places. If it's off just a little bit of a fraction, then you're going to have potentially see joints in the areas in the laser or the engraving that maybe they don't line up just right, because each one of those is now a piece of the puzzle that has to fit perfectly. Whereas if you've got just a continuous jog of the laser doing something, it's going to look more uniform. But ultimately, time is money. But if you produce something really, really quick that looks like crap, it ain't worth anything. So I'm like, okay, how can we get this better, a better result, and still save time? So I started experimenting with this frame in a whole bunch of different configurations, because there's lots of possibilities and lots of ways you can configure this, and using the different settings in Lightburn to figure out the most efficient way. And this is what I found. So let's grab all of this, and we're going to get rid of that for a second, and we're going to grab all of this and bring it in over here. And what you can see here is I have configured this frame in 5 different configurations. Here's the standard one we just looked at. Here is the standard with a flood fill. I should have fixed that. I got that wrong in both places there, so let me fix that. Flood fill. Flood fill. Okay. There, that's standard, that's standard. Okay, now. Very good. So 21 minutes, 15 minutes. I got it down to 14 minutes. That one went back up to 21, so essentially that's the same as the original. But then I got it down to 10 minutes and 21 or 26 seconds. So I've cut it in engrave time in half, from 21 minutes to 10 minutes. Now we're talking about some serious time saving. If you were engraving, 6 of these in a day, you've just saved an hour, right? And that's just on the frame. So how did I do this, and what's the difference, and how did I come about it? Well, I come about it by just testing and testing and testing some more. And you cannot test enough when it comes to your laser designs and work. The more you test, the more you're going to begin to understand how the program works, how your lasers work. So don't be afraid to try new things. Undo is always your best friend. So what I did initially to cut it from 15 to 14 is I took the laser and I took the frame and I cut it up into 4 quadrants, each on its own axis, north, south, east, and west, and put all those on their own separate layer. They all have the exact same speed and power settings, so that doesn't deviate any. That one's different power, but it's the same speed, 4200. So I'm keeping everything as equivalent as possible. Here I'm still using the flood fill, but 4 layers. So this, all right, let's look at this one down here again. Look at the preview. You see you got a lot of extra traversal moves across there. Here, if we take this one and look at it in preview, you don't have all the extra traversal moves across the middle of the body, but there's still a lot of unnecessary movement up here on the actual x-axis and down here as well. You don't see it on the y. The y gives you exactly what you expect, but on the x-axis in flood fill, it jumps around all over the place. So if we roll this back, there you can see what I'm talking about. It's going to begin to fill, and it just starts jumping around on the x-axis in flood fill. And those are the pieces of the puzzle I was talking about that are going to need to line up every single time that laser jumps around. We've saved some more time, saved another minute from 15 to 14. But when I looked at this, this is the same 4 individual individual pieces, but I put them all on the same layer. So this is a standard fill. 4 grouped shapes, fill groups together is the option I have in the fill setting, and I'll show you that. But when I did that, so if I look over here and I click on this one, let's see, it's grouped. And if I go to preview, 2105, changed a second, but it's the same as up here. All right, I've got all that wasted energy and wasted time. This one is the same thing again. So these are all the same configuration. This is west, east, north, and south. And if I come down here, I've got same thing. There's west, there's east, there's north, and there's south. So this one is exactly the same as this up here. But what I did differently is instead of using flood fill, I went back to the standard fill and I left them ungrouped and fill shapes individually. So this is the difference between 10 minutes and 26 seconds and 21 minutes. These are 4 grouped shapes and fill groups together. This is 4 ungrouped shapes and fill shapes individually. And then we'll just look at this preview and then I'll show you those settings. Preview. Now this is how I would expect flood fill to work, where it's going to fill each axis top to bottom and then go grab the next axis. That's how I would anticipate flood fill to work correctly and the most efficiently. Because you see there I had one traversal move across the center and that's it. And everything got engraved without all the hopscotch and jumping around. Now the difference is in the grouping and in the settings. So if I go to layer 10, that's the 4 individual shapes, four grouped shapes and filled groups together. So all 4 shapes are grouped and fill groups together. And that was back to the original time of if it would have been all one grouping. It wouldn't have doesn't matter that they're individual shapes, because you've got the individual shapes grouped and then fill groups together. When you group individual shapes, those are 4 individual pieces, but when you group them, it becomes one group. All right? So you're no longer at 4 individual pieces. Down here, we've got 4 ungrouped shapes. So there are 4 individual pieces right here, and we've got fill shapes individually turned on instead of fill groups together. So with them being individual pieces, and we're telling the laser to fill each piece individually, it's going to fill that shape, then go to the next one, fill that shape, and move to the next one, so on and so forth. But there's 10 minutes and 26 seconds from the original engraved time of 21 minutes and 6 seconds. Now, I've tried this on a couple of different designs and a couple of different patterns. In fact, I reworked this one, and let's take a look at that so you can see that it's not just in this layout. So let's grab all of this and pull this over here, and then get that new one that I redesigned, not flames, frames. There we go. So here is one I reworked the design, the layout. I centered up the hearts and fixed, didn't fix. I did not fix anything. I hobofied this artwork. This was his artwork, and I hobofied it. I like symmetry. I see it, and symmetry is accepted as the more symmetrical an item is, and or a person, the more pleasant it is to the eye. I've seen studies where they've taken faces of individuals, even someone who isn't a classic beauty. The more symmetrical their face is, the more pleasing they are to the eye. You can take someone who has got a very attractive right side of the face and a very attractive left side of the face, and if they're really asymmetrical, the more asymmetry that's there, the less attractive they appear to be. Same thing with our artwork. The more symmetry we can build into it, the more pleasing it is to the eye. So I did not improve it. I hobo-fied it, and this is what I did. So I just centered up. In fact, bring one over here so you can see them side by side. I went in and changed the position of the hearts and added some corner pieces for the medical field. So this is just a hobo-fied version, and because of what I did, I ended up adding a little extra time to it because I got more engraving going on. But this is still 4 ungrouped shapes and fill shapes individually. And when we look at this, it's 11 minutes with only that one wasted traversal move. But if I take that, let's duplicate it and bring it over here. And now I'm going to select, let's turn off the toolpath. Select these 4 individual shapes, because if you see down here, I got 4 objects. Tells you how many you've got. 4 objects. And if I just simply group them and put that on that 10 layer where I had to fill groups together. And now look at the preview. 21 minutes again instead of the 11 minutes. So I've learned that and it seems to be flood fill works great as long as there is uniformity to the frame area, as far as it's just doesn't have to be rectangular, as long as it's just a constant path without a lot of artwork, ropes and chains, and hear the heartbeats and all that. It seems to affect flood fill on the x-axis. The y-axis does what it's supposed to do, or what I anticipate it to do. All of that aside, if you take your frames and you divide them up into 4 sections, north, south, east, and west, leave them all on the same layer, leave them all ungrouped, and then put your fill and fill shapes individually, it's going to move in a way that I anticipate flood fill should work. You don't have to worry about the precision of your machine. If you're not using the Roly lasers, then your laser may be a little, it works great, but maybe it's just not as precise. It's okay. If you do it this way, your laser is going to be moving in a continuous motion. And if anything, maybe your square is just a little skewed if your belts aren't right. But you don't have to worry about things lining up because you're moving in a constant line. It's going to be lined up. So give this a try with some of your artwork and your patterns. Play around with your frames when you're engraving. When you got all that traversal moves, man, you're sitting there waiting forever for your laser to finish. Here I've shown you how to cut that time in half, and flood fill may not be the answer. Now, I've sent an email to Lightburn Support to try and get some feedback from those guys to understand, because I'm not a programmer and I'm not a coder, and I don't speak code. So I asked if they had someone who did speak code, but also could translate it to dummy speak, to understand why it does what it does when it does what it does in flood fill with designs. And why is it only on the x-axis? Maybe it's not supposed to do that, and they're going to say, oh, you know what, there's something going on here, and they can fix it. Because if they can fix flood fill so it does that, then you're not going to have to be breaking your frames down into quadrants and do all that. But until it does do what we expect it to do, if you're in a production environment, this can save you a tremendous amount of time, and flood fill by itself may not always be the answer. There's always another way. keep testing, keep trying to figure things out. And as I learn things, I'll share them with you. Okay, while I was recording and doing all this testing, I've been going back and forth with Lightburn Support, trying to get a better grasp of what was going on, why was it doing what it was doing. Is there a better way? Can they show me? And then they weren't able or would not communicate via a teleconference. So we went back and forth with nearly a dozen emails, and no, I got no answers. I did learn something though, and that's why I want to share this with you now, because as I just said, as I learned something, I want to share it with you. And so I did learn there is something that changes in the flood fill when you change the scan angle. And they had made some kind of remark regarding the scan angle, and so I'm like, okay, let me see what that does, and check this out. So this is the original shape, and it's right now I've got it in wireframe mode. So if I put it in fill mode, you can see it's filled. Put it back in wireframe mode, and if I select just this frame, it is in flood fill, and as I said, it's 15 minutes. And I look at the preview, just confirm everything. It's 15 minutes and 5 seconds. And I want you to look here. When I was saying it was when it was on moving up the y-axis of the frame, everything's being engraved on a 0 degree angle, left to right. But as we moved up the y-axis of the frame, on the left side, on the right side, you see it's just a continuous engraving. It's not doing anything irregular. It's not jumping around and acting a fool. But if once we got to the horizontal part of the frame, or the x-axis of the frame, everything's all chopped up and done in individual pieces, little jigsaw pieces, on the top and the bottom. If I scroll that back, once again, you see what I'm talking about. See, as it goes up that column there, just nice and steady, regular engraving. Then once it goes back to the top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom, 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 top, top, bottom, bottom, top. It's jumping everywhere. And that's with a 0 degree scan angle. So let's see what happens when we go in here and change our scan angle to 90 degrees. Preview. It inverts the results. Now everything across the top and across the bottom is being engraved in one foul swoop, but the sides are being all chopped up. So there you can see, so all the way across there, no problem. Then, well, it did chop that part of the top, and I didn't see that, but oh no, that's right, duh. It's the top and bottom that gets all the way across there, no problem. Starts a little bit on the top and stops, goes the other side, starts top, then it jumps down to the bottom and does all the way across the bottom. And then once it's done that, it'll go back and forth, right, left, 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 until it gets finished. And also, let's look at the time there. It changed to 21 minutes and 48 seconds. So it's still in flood fill. All it done was change the scan angle from 0 to 90, and it jumped 6 minutes by changing the scan angle. The reason for that is now it's working on a 90 degree scan angle, so it's moving that gantry and the whole laser head, everything. It's moving a whole lot more mass, and it, even though we're showing 42 millimeters a minute, same speed, well, it's taking longer because it's moving more stuff. Those are estimate times, and it's taking 6 minutes longer on a 90 degree scan angle. They never really understood, or initially they didn't understand. I was looking for the fastest field engraving. Initially, they said, here, we can do it in 3 minutes. I said, show me how you did that in 3 minutes. And you got it in line mode. Of course you did it in 3 minutes. You didn't engrave anything. All you did was put a line on there. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the fastest field engraving. And they said, well, that's how flood fill works. They said on complex shapes, Lightburn will divide those shapes up into pieces to make it most efficient engraving. Well, that's not the most efficient engraving, and it's not 100% accurate because depending on the scan angle, it determined what was being chopped up. So I think there's actually a small little flaw in the math somewhere on that flood fill. And if you are in a production environment where time is crucial and you need to produce as many pieces as you can as fast as you can, but you want quality work, not speeding the laser up just to be speeding the laser up, then you would be better off to take at this time, and this was using Lightburn 1.7.08, you would be better off to take the time and separate your framework, your frame design, or any type of engraving that's going to go around a perimeter. It doesn't have to be a frame, whatever it's going to be. But if you have a perimeter frame that's going to have a large void in the middle, then section that off into 4 pieces. Leave them on the same layer. Do not group them. Set up your layer settings to fill shape or individually. Don't group them and fill individual shapes. And that is going to give you your quickest, most rapid engraving on a perimeter engraving at this time. It works the way flood fill, I think, should work. I'm not a programmer. I'm not a coder. I don't speak code, don't speak program. So everything I just said about it should work that way. Maybe it just can't. I don't know. Seems that it can because it does. Each axis, the horizontal was engraved right, one on one scan angle, then the other one was scanned right on the other scan angle. So it seems like it can do it, but does it have to pick and choose? It doesn't seem like it, because when you're doing individual shapes ungrouped, everything's being scanned on a 0-degree scan angle, and it does it. I don't know. It seems like there's just a little hiccup there that maybe no one's pointed out yet, or maybe it just isn't possible. So hopefully you found this a little informative. This is when I'm not designing projects. This is what I'm doing. I'm kicking the tires and trying to break it and trying to find better ways to do things in Lightburn to improve my Lightburn experience and yours. So if you found this informative, if you've made it through this far, consider going over to patreon.com/hobowithwood and becoming a regular supporter of the Hobo Nation. It is my patrons, which are the best patrons in the YouTube universe, that make this channel possible. Without my patrons, I wouldn't be here. So thank each and every one of you, especially you. You know who you are. Pat yourself on the back. Be sure and go over and where is it? There it is, right there. Be sure you go over and like, share, and subscribe. This was an informative day for me. Hopefully it was a video you made it through. If you know of anything else or any other ideas or suggestions, put them in the comments. I'd love to hear them. So, until the next video, I'm Steve, Hobo with Wood, and I'm out.